Listen, I have seen a lot of weird things in my 300 cycles of existence. I have watched suns collapse into themselves like deflating balloons. I have witnessed entire civilizations rise and fall over arguments about which appendage was superior for eating. I have even seen a Glorpian try to seduce a sentient gas cloud, which, let me tell you, did not end well for anyone involved. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day a human walked into the court of eternal flame and made our dragon queen cry. My name is Vex, just Vex. Not Vex, the magnificent, not Vex the destroyer. Just plain old Vex. I am what you would call a court attendant, which is a fancy way of saying I stand around looking important while doing absolutely nothing of value. It is a great job. Excellent benefits. Minimal risk of combustion. The court of eternal flame sits at the heart of Puraxis, our home world. Everything here is red. Red rocks, red skies, red sand. We like red. We are dragons after all. Well, technically we are Dracus, but humans always call us dragons because apparently every species with scales and wings gets the same treatment. Very original, humans. Very original indeed. Our queen, Sirath Valkara, rules from a throne carved from a single piece of volcanic glass. She is magnificent, 200 feet of scales, wings that could blot out 3 suns, a temper that makes supernovas look like birthday candles. She has ruled for 8,000 cycles. She has conquered 14 star systems. She has never, not once, shown weakness. Until that day, it started like any other morning. I was standing in my usual spot, 3rd pillar from the left, trying not to fall asleep while some ambassador from the Tentacle Consortium droned on about trade agreements. The queen sat on her throne, looking appropriately bored and terrifying. Her scales shimmered in the firelight. Her eyes glowed with barely contained power. Standard stuff. Then the doors exploded open. Not literally. That would have been less surprising. No, they just swung open normally, which was the weird part, because those doors weigh about 40 tons each and require 6 guards to operate. But they just opened. Smooth, like someone had hit an automatic button, except we do not have automatic buttons because we are dragons and we like to do things the hard way. Standing in the doorway was a human. Now, humans visit Puraxis sometimes. Not often, because most species find our average surface temperature of 700 degrees a bit uncomfortable. But humans are crazy, so occasionally one shows up wearing some ridiculous cooling suit and tries to negotiate mining rights or whatever it is humans do when they are not blowing themselves up. This human was not wearing a cooling suit. He just stood there, in the doorway, wearing what appeared to be simple traveling clothes. Brown pants, white shirt, some kind of jacket. His hair was dark and fell across his forehead. He carried nothing except a small wooden case slung across his back. Every guard in the room immediately pointed their plasma lances at him. The temperature rose by several hundred degrees as the queen tensed. The Tentacle Consortium ambassador made a squeaking sound and tried to hide behind a pillar, which was hilarious because he had 17 tentacles and approximately 0 ability to hide effectively. But the human just smiled. "Hello," he said in perfect Drakash. "My name is Marcus Kane. I have traveled very far to be here. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but your door system is really quite impressive and I could not resist testing it." The queen stared at him. We all stared at him. He should have been on fire. The ambient temperature in the throne room hovers around 500 degrees. Humans combust at approximately 450. It is basic biology. I paid attention during at least some of my education. "How are you not dead?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. Marcus looked at me and winked. Actually winked. Trade secret. Also, I might be wearing a personal shield generator under my shirt, but where is the fun in admitting that? The queen rose from her throne. The entire room shook. When a 200-foot dragon stands up, you notice. "You dare enter my court uninvited, human. You dare mock my guards with your parlor tricks." Her voice was like grinding mountains, like thunder given form and fury. Lesser species have been known to lose consciousness just from the sound of her displeasure. Marcus tilted his head. "Actually, I was invited." "Sort of. About 80 standard years ago, you sent a message into human space. A diplomatic inquiry. It took a while to reach us. Space is big, communication is slow, bureaucracy is eternal. But I am here now, and I come bearing gifts. The queen narrowed her eyes. They glowed like molten gold. I sent no such message. Well, Marcus said, shifting the wooden case on his back. Technically you did not send it, but someone from Paraxis did. Someone important. Someone who wanted to open relations with humanity. Someone who, and I quote, wanted to hear the songs of Earth before the silence claimed them. The temperature dropped. I have worked in the court of eternal flame for 70 cycles. I have never, not once, seen the temperature drop. We are dragons. We make things hotter. It is literally what we do. But in that moment, the air grew cold. Not cold like ice cold, but cold like absence of heat cold. Like the queen had sucked all the thermal energy out of the room in a single instant. She took a step forward. Then another. Her massive form descended the stairs from her throne with unusual grace. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. The guards lowered their weapons, confused. The Tentacle Consortium ambassador stopped squeaking. What did you say? The queen's voice was quiet now, dangerous quiet. The kind of quiet that precedes planetary extinction events. Marcus did not flinch. Give the human credit. He had nerves of titanium. Songs of Earth. That is what the message said. It was encrypted in a frequency that took our best scientists 40 years to decode. By the time we figured it out, the coordinates led here, to Praxis, to your court. So I came. I brought the songs. Who sent this message? The queen was now only 20 feet from Marcus. From my angle she looked like a mountain about to fall on a pebble. Marcus smiled again, but this time it was different. Softer. Sadder. The message was not signed, but it contained a musical notation. A very specific sequence. My grandmother recognized it immediately. She said it was from a tune her mother used to sing, a tune that came from old Earth, from before the diaspora. A tune that should not exist anywhere else in the galaxy. He unslung the wooden case from his back. His movements were careful, deliberate. The message said that someone on Paraxis had heard this song once, long ago, from a human traveler. That someone wanted to hear it again before they died. That someone promised they would remember. The queen said nothing. She just stared. For a creature that large, the silence was somehow even more imposing than the noise. Marcus opened the case. Inside was an instrument. I have seen human instruments before. Guitars, violins, pianos. This looked like a violin, but smaller, more delicate. The wood was dark and polished to a high shine. This is called a fiddle. It is an old Earth instrument. Very old. The kind of thing we do not make anymore. Not really. This one belonged to my great-great-great-grandmother. It has been in my family for 300 years. He lifted the fiddle out of the case, tucked the instrument under his chin, drew the bow across the strings with a motion so practiced it looked like breathing. The message asked for one song specifically, a song called The Star Traveler's Lament. My grandmother taught it to me when I was 5 years old. She said it was important. She said someday someone would need to hear it. I never understood what she meant. Not until I decoded that message. He began to play. I am not an expert on human music. I do not pretend to understand the appeal of organized sound waves. But what came from that fiddle was something else entirely. It was lonely. It was beautiful. It was the sound of distance and longing and memories that hurt too much to forget. The melody rose and fell like breathing. Like a heartbeat that was slowly fading. Every dragon in the room stood perfectly still. The guards forgot their weapons. The advisors forgot their whispers. Even the Tentacle Consortium ambassador stopped trying to hide and just listened, his 17 tentacles swaying slightly to the rhythm. And the queen began to shrink. That is the thing about Drakash. We can shift our size at will. It is a survival trait, useful for navigating different environments. Most of us spend our time at full scale because it is impressive and intimidating and frankly just more comfortable. But the queen was changing, becoming smaller, more compact, more human-sized. By the time Marcus finished the first verse, Queen Serath stood at roughly 6 feet tall. Her scales had smoothed into something resembling skin. though still faintly shimmering with that signature red and gold. Her wings had folded into her back, barely visible. Her face was elegant, sharp, with those same molten gold eyes that could probably still incinerate you with a glance, but now contained in a form that seemed fragile by comparison. She looked young, impossibly young, maybe the equivalent of a human in their 30s, but her eyes carried the weight of millennia. And in that moment, as Marcus played, those eyes were— Dragons do not cry. We produce thermal regulation fluids, but they evaporate instantly in our internal temperatures. Crying is biologically impossible for us, except apparently when you shapeshift small enough that your internal temperature drops below boiling point and your emotional response overwhelms your biological programming. A single tear rolled down the Queen's cheek. Then another. She stood there, frozen, while the human played a song from 8 decades ago, from a promise someone had made, from a memory she had kept locked away for longer than most civilizations have existed. Marcus transitioned into the second verse. The melody became more complex, more painful. It was the sound of goodbye, of watching someone leave and knowing they will never return, of distance measured not in miles but in fundamental impossibility. The Queen's voice cracked. You remembered. Marcus did not stop playing, but he nodded slightly. His fingers danced across the strings with impossible grace. The bow sang against the wood. The sound filled the throne room like a living thing. We always remember, he said, somehow speaking while playing without missing a single note. That is what humans do. We remember the important things. We pass them down. We keep them alive even when they should have died centuries ago. Someone made my great-great-great-grandmother promise to preserve this song, to teach it to her children, and their children, and so on, to make sure that if anyone ever called for it, we would answer. He played faster now. The song built towards something. A climax. A moment of truth. That person told her that someday, someone would need to hear this music. Someone who had given up hope. Someone who had locked away their heart because it was easier than remembering. Someone who needed to know that promises can survive time and distance and the fundamental entropy of the universe. The Queen collapsed to her knees. A sound escaped her throat that I had never heard before and hoped never to hear again. It was grief. Pure, undiluted, overwhelming grief. The kind of sound that should not come from a creature who had ruled star systems and commanded armies and never once shown weakness. Marcus brought the song to its conclusion. The final notes hung in the air like ghosts, like echoes of something beautiful that had been lost and found and lost again. He lowered the fiddle slowly, carefully, as if afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the moment. His name was Daniel, the Queen whispered. Her voice was barely audible, broken. His name was Daniel Frost, and he was a human explorer who crashed on Piraxis 8,214 cycles ago. He should have died. Everything about our world should have killed him, but his ship had some kind of experimental shielding. He survived for 3 months before we found him. She looked up at Marcus. Tears streamed down her face openly now. I was young then, only 200 cycles. I did not understand humans. I did not understand why you were all so fragile and short-lived and insistent on exploring places that would kill you. But Daniel was different. He was not afraid of me. He played his music on that same kind of instrument. He told me stories about Earth, about places with water that fell from the sky and plants that grew without fire. He made me laugh, which I had never done before. He made me feel things I did not have words for. The throne room was silent. I suddenly felt like I was intruding on something deeply private, something that should not have witnesses. But I could not move. None of us could. We had 3 months, the Queen continued. 3 months before his shields failed and his ship's life support gave out. 3 months before he got sick from the radiation exposure. 3 months before I had to watch him die because our biology was too different for any medical intervention to work. He made me promise something before he died. He made me promise that I would not forget him, that I would remember what it felt like to connect with someone so completely different from myself, that I would not let his death make me hate humans. She laughed, but it was a hollow sound. I kept that promise for 8,000 cycles. I built my empire. I conquered systems. I became the most powerful Drakus in the sector. But I never forgot Daniel. I never forgot his music. And 50 cycles ago, when I realized I was getting old, when I realized that even dragons do not live forever, I sent out that message. I did not expect an answer. I thought it would disappear into the void like everything else. But I had to know if anyone still remembered the songs of Earth, if anyone still knew what Daniel had taught me. Marcus set the fiddle back in its case with reverent care. He approached the queen slowly. When he was close enough, he knelt down so they were at eye level. My great-great-great-grandmother was Daniel Frost's sister. She spent her entire life preserving his music, teaching it to her children, making sure that if his promise ever came home, someone would be there to answer it. I am the 5th generation to carry that responsibility. I am here because Daniel wanted you to know that someone remembered, that promises matter, that connections survive even death. The queen reached out with one hand, touched Marcus's face gently. You look like him, around the eyes. The same stubborn determination to do incredibly stupid things for reasons that make no logical sense. Marcus grinned. Yeah, it runs in the family. We are all idiots who travel across the galaxy to deliver 80-year-old messages to dragon queens. It is our defining characteristic. And then the queen laughed. Actually laughed. It was a sound like crystal bells, like joy that had been locked away for so long it had forgotten how to exist. She grabbed Marcus and pulled him into a hug that probably would have crushed a normal human, but somehow he survived. And she just held him there while she cried and laughed and probably cycled through every emotion a creature could experience in the span of 30 seconds. I looked around the throne room. Every dragon present was staring in complete shock. The guards had lowered their weapons entirely. The advisors looked like they had forgotten how to advise. Even the Tentacle Consortium ambassador seemed moved, which was impressive because tentacle species do not have tear ducts and express emotion through color changes that most of us cannot even perceive. The queen finally released Marcus, stood up, wiped her eyes, somehow managed to look regal and completely undone at the same time. Marcus Kane, she said formally, 5th generation of the Frost line, bearer of promises and songs and incredibly poor survival instincts. I, Serath Volcara, Queen of Piraxis and ruler of 14 systems, officially grant you asylum and protection for as long as you wish to remain in my territory. You have given me something I thought was lost forever. Ask anything of me, and if it is within my power, it shall be yours. Marcus stood up, brushed some dust off his pants. Actually, Your Majesty, I have a request, but it is kind of weird. The queen raised an eyebrow. Weirder than traveling across the galaxy to play music for a dragon? Point taken. Marcus retrieved his fiddle from the case again. Daniel's journals mentioned that you never learned to play. He wanted to teach you, but you thought your hands were too big and your claws would break the strings. But now, he gestured at her current human-sized form. Now you have hands that could hold an instrument. So my request is this: let me teach you. Let me pass on what Daniel wanted to share. Let me honor his promise completely. The queen stared at the fiddle. Marcus. At the wooden instrument that represented a connection across time and space and fundamental impossibility. Then she smiled. Genuine. Bright. The kind of smile that could have powered a... Yes, she said simply. Teach me. And that, my friends, is how a human stranger walked into the court of eternal flame and made our dragon queen cry. It is also how I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is not weapons or technology or conquest. Sometimes it is just music and memory and the insistence on keeping promises that should have died long ago. But humans are crazy like that. They remember. They persist. They carry impossible things across impossible distances just because someone once asked them to. And sometimes, just sometimes, that makes all the difference. So there I was, standing in the court of eternal flame, watching my queen of 8,000 cycles take fiddle lessons from a human who had apparently inherited the galaxy's most elaborate family obligation. If you had told me this would happen when I woke up that morning, I would have recommended a psychological evaluation and possibly some anti-hallucination medication. But here we are. Life is weird. Marcus spent the next 3 hours teaching Queen Serath basic finger positions. This involved a lot of patience on his part and a surprising amount of frustration on hers. Turns out even when you are an ancient dragon who has mastered 17 forms of combat and can calculate hyperspace trajectories in your head, learning to play a musical instrument is still annoying. No, not like that, Marcus said, for approximately the 50th time. You need to press down firmly but not too firmly. The string has to touch the fingerboard clean. Sirath glared at the fiddle like it had personally insulted her ancestors. This is impossible. How did Daniel make this look easy? Practice. Lots and lots of practice. Also, he started when he was 6 years old, so he had a slight advantage. Marcus adjusted her grip gently. You are actually doing really well for someone who has been holding the instrument for less than 3 hours. Most beginners sound like they are torturing cats. You only sound like you are mildly annoying cats. The queen made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been suppressed frustration. Hard to tell with dragons, even small-sized ones. I have commanded armies across 14 systems. I have negotiated treaties that prevented galactic wars. I have personally survived 7 assassination attempts. And this tiny wooden box is defeating me. Welcome to being human, Marcus said cheerfully. We spend most of our lives being defeated by things that should be simple. It builds character. Also humility. Mostly humility. I watched this interaction with growing fascination. The queen had dismissed everyone else from the throne room except me, probably because she forgot I existed. Guards, advisors, even the Tentacle Consortium ambassador had been sent away. It was just the 3 of us now. Well, 2 of them and me hiding behind my pillar trying not to breathe too loudly. Tell me about Daniel, the queen said suddenly. She lowered the fiddle and looked at Marcus with those intense golden eyes. Tell me what happened after he left Paraxis. I never knew. The crash had destroyed his communication equipment. By the time I learned that other humans were looking for him, it was too late. He was already gone. Marcus sat down cross-legged on the floor. He looked tired suddenly. The kind of tired that comes from carrying heavy things for a long time. Daniel's ship was reported missing for 2 years before they declared him dead. My great-great-great-grandmother, his sister Elena, never accepted it. She spent the rest of her life trying to find out what happened to him. She tracked down every lead, every rumor, every whisper about human explorers in this sector. He picked at an invisible thread on his jacket. She eventually found evidence that his ship had crashed somewhere in the Paraxis system. But by then, 80 years had passed. She was old. Dying. She gathered her children and grandchildren around her deathbed and told them everything. About Daniel's mission. About his love for exploration. About how he always said that the most important thing humans could do was connect with other species. Understand them. Share something meaningful. Surath sat down beside him. Even in her smaller form, she moved with that fluid grace unique to predators. He said, the same things to me. He talked about Earth constantly, about oceans and forests and rain, things I could barely comprehend, he said. That humans were fragile and short-lived, but that made every moment more precious. That we dragons lived so long we forgot to appreciate existence. That sounds like Daniel, Marcus said softly. Lena made us promise to keep his music alive, to preserve the songs he loved. She said that someday, somehow, it would matter. That music was humanity's way of defying entropy, of creating order and beauty in a universe that constantly tries to tear things apart. She encrypted that promise into our family genetics practically. Every generation learned the songs. Every generation passed them down. We became guardians of something we did not fully understand. The queen reached out and took the fiddle from Marcus, ran her fingers across the strings gently. They made a soft, discordant sound. For 8,000 cycles I convinced myself that what Daniel and I shared was an anomaly, a temporary insanity caused by isolation and circumstance. I told myself that connections between species were impossible, that we are all too different, that trying to bridge that gap only leads to pain. She plucked one string, then another. I built my empire on that philosophy. Strength, isolation, self-sufficiency. I made Paraxis powerful because I refused to be vulnerable again. I refused to care about anything that could be taken away, and it worked. I became legendary. Feared, respected, empty. Marcus did not say anything. Sometimes silence is the best response. Humans understand that better than most species. They know when to shut up and just listen. Then 50 cycles ago, something changed. The Queen continued. I started forgetting things. Small things at first. Names of minor functionaries. Details of old treaties. Nothing important. But it scared me. Dragons do not forget. Our memory is nearly perfect. But I was forgetting. And I realized that maybe I was not immortal after all. That even someone like me would eventually fade. And when I was gone, everything I had experienced, everything I had felt, would disappear like it never existed. She set the fiddle down carefully. So I sent that message. One final act of vulnerability before I sealed myself away completely. I did not expect anyone to answer. I certainly did not expect someone to show up 80 years later with Daniel's actual family instrument and an offer to teach me what he never could. The universe has a terrible sense of humor, or a great one depending on your perspective, Marcus said. He stood up and stretched, his joints popping in that disturbing way human bodies do. Look, Your Majesty, can I be honest with you? Sarath raised an eyebrow. I would prefer dishonesty. But proceed. I had to stifle a laugh at that. The Queen had a sense of humor. Marcus grinned. Fair enough. Here is the thing. My family has been carrying this promise for 5 generations, teaching these songs, preserving this music, waiting for a message that might never come. Do you know how hard that is? Maintaining hope for something that seems impossible? Believing that somewhere out there someone still cared about an explorer who died centuries ago? He picked up his fiddle case and hugged it to his chest. There were times I wanted to quit. Times I thought this was all pointless. That Elena had been a grief-stricken old woman who invented meaning where none existed. But my mother made me promise. And her mother made her promise. And so on. We carried this weight because we believed in what Daniel believed in. That connections matter. That promises matter. That sometimes you do things not because they make sense but because they are right. The Queen stood up. Her form shimmered slightly. For a moment I thought she was going to shift back to full dragon size, which would have been spectacular and possibly fatal for Marcus and me. But instead she just glowed. Her scales caught the light and reflected it in patterns that made my eyes hurt. You came here expecting what, exactly? That I would learn to play fiddle and suddenly everything would be perfect. That Daniel's death would retroactively mean something. That your family's sacrifice would be validated. Marcus met her gaze without flinching. No, I came here because I made a promise. Because someone needed to complete the circle. Because 8,000 cycles ago, a human told a dragon that he be remembered and I needed to prove that he was right. That is all. No expectations beyond that. They stared at each other for a long moment. The temperature in the room fluctuated wildly. Then the Queen did something completely unexpected. She started laughing. Really laughing. The kind of laughter that comes from deep in your chest and echoes off the walls and makes everyone around you uncomfortable because they do not know if you have gone insane or achieved enlightenment. You humans are absolutely ridiculous, she said between gasps. You travel across the galaxy on quests that make no practical sense. You keep promises to dead people. You preserve music for centuries on the off chance someone might want to hear it. You are inefficient and illogical and your lifespans are barely longer than a Draca's sneeze. And yet somehow you are the most stubbornly persistent species I have ever encountered. Marcus bowed dramatically. We try our best. Persistence is basically humanity's superpower. That and coffee. Coffee is very important to us. The Queen wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Her form stabilized back into that elegant human-sized shape. Marcus Kane, I have a proposition for you. Stay here on Paraxis. Not forever, I know your species gets anxious if you are in one place too long. But stay for a while. Teach me to play properly. Tell me about Earth. About how humans have changed in 8,000 cycles. About what Daniel's legacy became. And in exchange I will teach you about Draca's history. About the things we have learned. About perspectives that come from living long enough to watch stars be born. She extended her hand in that very human gesture of agreement. Let us honor Daniel's memory properly. not with grief and regret, but with understanding and growth. Let us prove that connections between species are not just possible but essential. What do you say? Marcus took her hand and shook it firmly. I say that sounds like the best bad idea I have heard all year. When do we start? Immediately, the Queen said. Then she turned toward my pillar. Essex, stop hiding. I know you have been there the entire time. Come out and make yourself useful. I stepped out from behind the pillar, trying to look like I had not been eavesdropping on the most significant conversation in recent Praxis history. Your Majesty, I was just, guarding very intently from this specific location. The Queen snorted. You are a terrible liar, but you will do. I need you to arrange accommodations for Marcus, somewhere with proper cooling systems and human-compatible amenities. Also, send a message to the High Council. Tell them I am taking a sabbatical. I blinked. A sabbatical. You. The Queen who has not taken a day off in 6,000 cycles. You want me to tell the High Council that you are taking a sabbatical? Yes. Is there a problem with your hearing, Vex? No, Your Majesty. No problem at all. I will get right on that. Should I mention why you are taking this sabbatical, or should I let them speculate wildly and probably assume you have been possessed by an alien consciousness? The Queen smiled. It was terrifying. Let them speculate. It will be entertaining. Also, clear my schedule for the next month. Cancel everything except the absolute emergencies. I am going to learn to play fiddle, and apparently that requires something called practice, which I have been assured is very important. And that is how Queen Serath Volcara, ruler of 14 systems, conqueror of armies, terror of the sector, became a music student. The next few weeks were absolutely insane. Marcus set up shop in one of the palace's smaller chambers. The Queen attended lessons every morning without fail. I got drafted into being their assistant, which mostly involved fetching things and trying not to die when the Queen got frustrated with a particularly difficult musical passage. The High Council lost their collective minds, obviously. Advisors kept showing up demanding explanations. The Queen sent them all away with increasingly creative threats. A few tried to go around her and convince Marcus to leave. He politely declined and then played them songs until they got emotional and wandered off in confusion. Humans are weaponizing music now. That is their strategy. I am both impressed and concerned, but the weirdest part was watching Serath change. Not physically, though she did spend most of her time in that smaller form now, but emotionally. She smiled more, laughed more, talked about things beyond military strategy and political maneuvering. She told stories about Daniel that I suspect no one else had ever heard, about conversations they had shared, jokes that only made sense between them, moments of connection that transcended language and biology and fundamental difference. Marcus reciprocated by sharing his family's history. He told us about Elena's relentless search for her brother, about the generations of musicians who kept Daniel's songs alive, about the debates and doubts and moments where it seemed like the whole thing was pointless, about his own decision to finally decode that ancient message and make the trip to Paraxis, even though everyone told him it was crazy. My mother thought I had lost my mind, he said one afternoon while tuning his fiddle. She asked why I cared so much about a great-great-uncle I had never met, why I would risk everything to deliver music to a dragon queen who might incinerate me on sight. I told her it was about more than Daniel. It was about proving that promises can survive anything. That meaning persists even when everything else falls apart. She called me an idiot, and then helped me pack. The Queen had just successfully played her first complete scale without mistakes. She was ridiculously proud of herself, which was adorable in a terrifying sort of way. Your mother sounds wise. All the best humans are idiots, who do things for reasons that make no logical sense. It is your defining characteristic. Coming from a dragon who is learning fiddle at 8,000 years old, I will take that as a compliment. They both laughed. I noticed that they laughed together a lot now. It was a comfortable sound. Easy. Like they had known each other for years instead of weeks. Maybe they had, in a way. Maybe some connections are not about time but about recognition, about seeing something in another person that resonates with something in yourself. 4 weeks into Marcus's stay, something happened. The queen was practicing a song called The Wanderer's Return. It was a complex piece that required rapid finger transitions and precise bow control. She had been working on it for 3 days, getting more frustrated with each attempt, but this time, something clicked. Her fingers found the right positions. Her bow moved with the right pressure and speed. The notes flowed together seamlessly. The music filled the chamber like living light. It was beautiful. Not perfect. Not by any professional standard. But it was real. Authentic. The sound of someone who had worked hard to create something meaningful. The sound of promises being kept and circles being closed and time folding back on itself until past and present were the same moment. When she finished, Marcus was crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears running down his face. "That was it," he whispered. That was the song Daniel played for Elena before he left. The last thing she ever heard from him. "You just played his final message perfectly." The queen set down the fiddle with shaking hands. "He never got to play it for me. He was too sick by the end. But he hummed it sometimes in his sleep. I never knew what it was called. Never knew it had words or history or meaning beyond the moment we shared. And now, 8,000 cycles later, I finally learned it. I finally finished what we started." She looked at Marcus with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Peaceful. Content. Like someone who had been carrying a weight for so long they forgot it was there and suddenly it was gone. "Thank you for coming here. For keeping your family's promise. For teaching me what Daniel wanted me to learn. For reminding me that some things are worth remaining vulnerable for." Marcus wiped his eyes and grinned. "You are welcome, but I have a confession to make. This whole teaching you fiddle thing. It was never just about the music. Elena told us that if we ever found the person who sent that message, we should help them remember something important. That isolation is easy, but connection is worth fighting for. That the universe is big and cold and empty unless you fill it with moments that matter. I think she wanted me to remind you of that." The queen laughed softly. "Your great-great-great-grandmother was a manipulative genius. I approve thoroughly. Daniel chose his family well. Yeah, we are pretty okay. For idiots who cross the galaxy on pointless quests." Marcus stood up and stretched again. "Those human joints really need better engineering. So, I have completed my mission, delivered the songs, taught the lessons, closed the circle, which means I should probably think about heading home. My ship is still in orbit and I have a family who is probably assuming I got eaten by dragons by now." Something flickered across the queen's face. Disappointment, maybe? Or fear? It was hard to read. "You are leaving. Of course. You have your own life. Your own responsibilities. I should not have expected you to stay indefinitely." "Hey," Marcus said gently. "I am not disappearing forever. I am just going home to tell everyone that the mission succeeded, that promises can survive 8,000 cycles and still matter, that somewhere in this galaxy, a dragon queen learned to play fiddle and did not incinerate me even once. That is a pretty good story. People should know about it." He picked up his fiddle case and slung it across his back. "Besides, I will come back. Maybe not next year. Human lifespans are short and space travel is slow. But someday. And in the meantime you should practice. Keep playing. Maybe teach other Dracs about music. Spread the madness around a bit." Daniel would have lied that. The queen stood and shifted. Her form expanded back to full dragon size, 200 feet of scales and wings and barely contained power. But somehow she looked smaller than before. More vulnerable. "Marcus Kane, 5th generation keeper of promises. I, Surith Volcara, name you friend of Piraxis and honorary Drakes. You will always have a place here. Always be welcome. And if you ever need anything at all, you call and we will answer. This I swear on Daniel's memory." Marcus bowed low. "That is possibly the coolest title I have ever received, and I once got named honorary mayor of an asteroid mining colony. So the bar was already pretty high. Thank you, Your Majesty, for everything, for trusting me, for letting me complete what my family started, for proving that humans and dragons can understand each other if they just try hard enough." They said their goodbyes. It was surprisingly emotional for creatures from completely different evolutionary paths. The queen even hugged him again, very carefully so as not to crush him accidentally. Then Marcus left. Walked out of the court of eternal flame the same way he came in. Casually, confidently. Like he had not just changed the course of Piraxis history. I stood there with the queen in the empty throne room. She stared at the doors for a long time. Then she looked down at me. "Vex, I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Your Majesty." "Set up a music school here on Piraxis. Teach any Dracass who wants to learn about human music and instruments. Bring in teachers from Earth. Create exchange programs. I want our species to understand what Daniel understood, that art and beauty and connection matter just as much as power and conquest. Maybe more." I blinked at her. "You want to turn Piraxis into a center for interspecies cultural exchange? You, the queen who built an empire on strength and isolation?" She smiled. That terrifying, beautiful smile that could have powered a sun. Marcus was right. Humans are idiots who do impossible things for no logical reason. I have decided to become more human. It seems like a worthwhile goal. Also, I need to practice my fiddle, and it would be nice to have an audience that appreciates the effort instead of looking confused and slightly afraid. And that is how it ended. Or began, depending on your perspective. Marcus Kane returned to Earth and told his story. Word spread. Humans started visiting Piraxis, not as traders or diplomats but as musicians and artists and teachers. The queen established her music school. Other species heard about it and got curious. Within 10 years, Piraxis had transformed from an isolated military power into a hub of cultural exchange. The queen kept practicing. Got pretty good, actually. Started composing her own pieces. Music that blended Dracash harmonics with human melodies. Sounds that should not work together but somehow created something new and beautiful. She performed occasionally, always starting with The Wanderer's Return, always dedicating it to Daniel Frost and Marcus Kane and the stubborn persistence of promises kept. As for me, I got promoted to Director of Cultural Affairs, which is hilarious because I have 0 qualifications. But I guess standing behind a pillar and witnessing history counts as experience now. I spend my days coordinating exchange programs and trying not to set things on fire accidentally. It is a good life. Weird, but good. Marcus came back. Eventually. Took him 15 years. But he made it. Walked into the court of eternal flame like no time had passed at all. The queen met him in her smaller form, fiddle already in hand. They played together. 2 beings from impossible different backgrounds creating harmony through sheer stubborn determination. And I realized something watching them. Humans are not special because they are strong or smart or technologically advanced. They are special because they refuse to accept that some things are impossible. They look at the universe and all its barriers and differences and distances, and they say no, no, we will find a way. We will build bridges. We will keep promises. We will remember. We will connect. That is humanity's real superpower. Not persistence, or coffee or any other nonsense. It is hope. Irrational, impossible, beautiful hope that connections matter and meaning persists. And love transcends biology and time and entropy itself. And sometimes when the universe is feeling generous, that hope is rewarded. Sometimes a human plays a melody and a dragon remembers her first love. Sometimes promises survive 8,000 cycles. Sometimes the most powerful thing in existence is not strength or conquest, but the simple act of showing up and saying, "I remember, you matter, let me prove it to you." So yeah, that is the story of how Marcus Kane changed everything. How a fiddle player from Earth taught a dragon queen about vulnerability. How promises kept across generations created something beautiful and impossible and absolutely real. Humans are crazy. Thank the stars for that.